Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Kenichi. I'm very excited tonight because if you were around in the Valley in the early 1990s, you had to remember this gentleman who's on our show tonight. He was a 4-year starter for the Seymour Wildcats in baseball, a 3-year starter for the Wildcats in football. He could also say that he played with A-Rod and Johnny Damon, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you. And also, folks, before I go any further, he will also be inducted into the Seymour Sports Hall of Fame October 28th, I believe. And it is my pleasure to introduce Bill Brooks. And Bill, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor.
Hey, Mike, thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
So, Bill, first off, I always ask this question because I'm always curious. How did the love for sports begin for you?
Well, ironically, I grew up next to a park, Posey Panko Park. On the other side of the park, you may know the name Eddie Essen.
Yeah.
Right? So Eddie Essen was on the other side of the park, and I was on this side of the park. But yeah, I have a sister. She's 8 years younger. So there wasn't a lot of kids in the neighborhood, so to speak. So I spent a lot of time at the park, and I picked up a lot of sandlot baseball games, sandlot football games, whatever I could get my hands on. And I play with kids of all ages, a little bit older, significantly older in my own age. So it was over time I just developed a passion for it, loved it, and I guess you get pretty good at what you love.
Right. And Bill, speaking of your sister, I want to throw this in there because for years I've been going to Webster Bank, and she has always been just a great person when it comes to customer service, treats everybody with respect. So the Brooks family is just a great family in general.
Good plug for my sister in Webster Bank, I guess.
Yeah. So, Bill, let me ask you, I would think you were 6 or 7 years old when Seymour won that state title in 1980. Do you remember it? I mean, did your father take you to the games as a kid?
Well, no, I did go to a lot of games. I lived in Oxford, and most Oxford players are students could go to either. At the time it was Seymour, or you would go to Emmett O'Brien for the technical schools, or Massac and Monroe. But I didn't go to a lot of games growing up as a kid. No.
Right.
Of course, we all knew about the big victory back then.
Right. So, what was the sport that you first started playing? Was it baseball? I mean, because I know Pop Warner was big in Seymour, but it sounds like to me the love really when you were a kid was baseball first.
Well, I wanted to play football, for a long time as a kid. My mom was a little reluctant, and I was a little bit of on the bigger side of the weight. And of course, as you know, Pop Warner specifically in that time frame was age and weight based. So the bigger kids just weren't able to play. So I was really very passionate about wanting to play. Just by the time I convinced my mother that it was a good idea to let me do that, I was a little bigger than I could play for. So I actually didn't play football until my freshman year of high school. So I was very excited to play, and I was extremely green. Looking back at it now, I mean, if I knew then what I knew now, I think I'd be a lot further along. But baseball was definitely my first love, if you will, and I played every game that I could possibly get my hands on. And I know teams sometimes being close to the park, I had the luxury of a team being short a guy or two, and they knock on my door and say, "Hey, you want to play today?" And I'd change my uniform and I'd go play with somebody else's uniform that day. So yeah, that's the story there.
Right. And like every kid at a young age, I mean, for me, I loved Don Mattingly. He was my guy. I mean, was there a player that you really idolized as a kid, a baseball player that you really enjoyed watching?
I don't know about idolized. I mean, Wade Boggs, I think, was a great player. He was him and Mattingly, I think, kind of went hand in hand back in the day with the Sox, the Yankees thing. So I wouldn't say I've ever been an overwhelmingly passionate professional sports fan. I like to watch a game like everybody else, but I had a tough time calling people my idols like that.
Right. And let me ask you, Bill, when you were playing Little League, I mean, were you catching right away? How did that come about for you?
No, I played kind of everywhere. Even in high school, when I started,
right. You played right.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. So no, I played shortstop. I pitched. I caught once in a while. I played kind of all around the field.
Right. So let me ask you, even though you weren't able to play football as a freshman, you say you're like fifth or sixth grade. I mean, can you growing up like again, like you said, Oxford and Seymour, a lot of them played for Seymour Pop Warner because it was the only thing you could do. I mean, did you kind of have a good idea of just how rich and tradition that Seymour football had by the time you had got to 11 or 12 years old?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I'm not sure what the process is today, but Paul Sponheimer, of course, was my coach, and I can remember to this day Spoonie coming in to talk to the eighth graders, the eighth grade boys, and say who's interested in football, and it was literally like a recruiting meeting, and it was you could see the passion in his voice, and you couldn't help but not want to be part of that kind of a team.
Right. So, Bill, we know you played baseball. Did you play any basketball as a young kid? I mean, it seems like to me you were a type of kid that just loved to play sports in general.
I played up until I don't know, maybe seventh or eighth grade, but I fouled out a lot. So it wasn't necessarily my best forte.
Right. And the thing too about Seymour, Bill, and this goes for Derby, this goes for Shelton, this goes for Ansonia. Think about when you were a kid. I mean, every Sunday, Monday, and Friday night, if you turned on telemedia, there was a Valley football game going on. There was always Cable 10, Ed Clemens and Buddy Chernovitz. They did a great job in which I know you were a player in the game a couple times during your career at Seymour. But I mean, the Valley was so big in sports back then. I mean, sometimes I think fans loved watching Valley sports more than they enjoyed watching professional sports because that's how big these Valley teams were and how huge they were.
Well, there's certainly a sense of pride in the Valley, and it's the whole Housatonic League, for that matter, back in
Right.
the '90s with the Housatonic League. So, yeah, there is a big sense of pride. In fact, I've gotten a call not so long, less than a year ago, someone watching reruns of some of those games back then, and I didn't know where you could find them, but apparently there's somewhere they're playing them on TV, reruns of the old Valley football games. So,
yeah,
there was a big sense of pride. I think that. Also, entertainment was a little more limited than it is now, where you've got your smartphones and you on TikTok apps and smart different forums. But I think it kind of forced people into into certain niches, which people found to enjoy, and they found themselves in groups, and they interacted a lot more then than perhaps they do now.
right. So, Bill, let me ask you. I know, like back when you were like 12, 13 years old, I don't know if there was necessarily a lot of travel teams back then. I know like kids played Babe Ruth, obviously, stuff like that. Did you play any other baseball besides like Little League and Babe Ruth at the time? Because now these kids play everywhere, travel teams, AAU, but I don't think it was necessarily there as much when you were a kid, correct?
I did not play in a small diamond. I never played any type of travel baseball. It wasn't until I got a little older that I got involved at I guess it was travel baseball probably not by today's standards, but by those standards, it was certainly travel baseball. But no, I played Little League, and like I said, I ended up playing probably on the 4 or 5 different teams over the course of a season because of my proximity, just my closeness to the fields. Literally, when people would knock on my door and say, "Hey, you want to play?" and I play in a big field, I play in a small field, just to fit in, or to fill in rather.
Right. And talk to me about this, Bill, because as a young kid, when a kid plays in all-star games, they kind of like it's the closest thing they have to like trying to be similar to a professional sport. If you're playing in an all-star game, that's a great feeling. You're playing with kids that you competed against. Now they're your teammates. So just talk about that experience getting to play in some of those all-star games as a kid.
You're really jogging my memory now. We're going back a couple of years here, Mike. I can say this. I can remember Peter J. Foley Field. When I was a kid, that was iconic. Today, that's an iconic field. I think it's one of the oldest Little League fields in the country, or something like that. As memory serves me, when we were 12 years old, we were in a championship semifinal, something like that. And there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of excitement, all the things that you're supposed to have in a big game. And I do recall the one play where I was playing center field. Ball got hit back to the fence, and the guy was in second. He was going to try to score. I figured I had the hose to get him down, and I let it have it from the fence. I ended up throwing the ball over the backstop, and the run scored, and we lost the game. So it was my best moment.
Right. But
long
yeah, go
throw.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing. That's it. Yeah.
Right. But Bill, like anything else, I mean, those moments aren't great. Sometimes, you go home and it's a rough day because you had a bad moment, but it's almost better to have those moments when you're younger, because then when you have the big moments when you're older, you appreciate them more, because you also know that sometimes, and especially that sport, you're going to fail a lot of the time. So when you do succeed, that makes it even more rewarding.
I wholeheartedly believe that baseball is a very good life sport. Right. To your point, if you're a pretty good baseball player, at least in a professional league, you're going to fail 7 out of 10 times. And you're going to call you a really good hitter. Right.
Yeah.
That teaches you a little bit of humility, right? And I'm a firm believer that as life goes on and progresses, which for the vast majority of us, less than the 1% of us, we don't go on to professional sports. Some of us learn rejection. Some of us learn how to fail. I think it's more important to learn how to fail, right, than it is to be. It's easy to succeed, right? You're successful by patting you on the back. When you fail, that's how you have to gain some strength and learn from your mistakes. So yeah, baseball is a great sport for that, no doubt.
Right. So, Bill, let me ask you. You brought it up earlier when Coach Sponheimer talked to you guys as eighth graders. I mean, had you already made up your mind before he talked to you that you were going to play football, or did his conversation with you guys really inspire you to say, you know what, I want to give this a try?
No, I don't think he could have talked me out of it if he tried, but he didn't. So it worked out for both of us.
Right. So, talk to me about freshman year, because one thing about Seymour football, Bill, that was different than so many other football programs. You basically, Coach Sponheimer always said that it's a privilege to play. It's not a right, and you have to do the things that are necessary. And he was also very big that if you quit that program, you weren't going to be allowed to come back. So he made sure that his players knew that if this is what you want to do, when you start that first day of practice in the summer, you're going to practice every day and you're giving me your best commitment.
Yeah, he wasn't kidding. There were some miserable days of summertime practice, I'll tell you that. You talk about specifically freshman year?
Just freshman year, but I know he wasn't the freshman coach, obviously, but I know that it's his program and he's making sure these freshmen know that, hey, when you get to freshman practice, you better have the commitment that I would expect you to have as a varsity player as well.
Yeah, Eric DeMarco was the freshman coach then, and he was a great coach, very good teacher. Went on to coach basketball, successful coaching career. Great guy, really tremendous coach as well. When I got there, I didn't know the rules to football to the degree that you think you should. We had the hose with the gaps, and Seymour actually runs it opposite than a lot of programs with the evens on the right, odds are on the left. A lot of schools are the opposite of that. But when someone told me to run off the guard, I didn't know what the guard was. Like what do you mean guard? Who's that? Who's guard? So yeah, I had a real big learning curve for that first month or so that I played on the freshman team.
Right. Now, were you a fullback that first year and linebacker? What did you play that first year on the freshman team?
I was a tailback, and I think I played defensive end. I can't really remember. I was either linebacker or defensive end. I bounced around quite a bit on defense.
Right. And those are two tough positions, tailback and defensive end, because as you know, the end has to contain. That's his big responsibility. And he also has to get to the quarterback. That's what the coaches really want the ends to do. And then the tailback, like you said, you have to know where to run, behind and, what holes to go in and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm sure once you got the hang of it, you enjoyed it a lot, but it is a lot of making sure you know your responsibilities.
Oh yeah, yeah. And until you know where you're supposed to run, you make a lot of mistakes, and you get. And that Seymour program's got a pretty high standard, so you get yelled at quite a bit.
Right. So, how would you kind of assess your freshman year as first-time player? I mean, do you feel like you had a good year? Were you satisfied with how your first year went? And I mean, what did you think you needed to improve on?
Well, my first year was interesting. So I played, I think, on one or two freshman games, and then I would go from the freshman practice up to the varsity practice, or I'd go up and play a JV game. So I was kind of getting, which was probably the best thing for me because I needed all the reps I could get, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would practice with the freshmen for a few minutes, and then
Right.
go up to the varsity practice and fill in there with the card team or whatever for a while. Um, and then I was fortunate enough I got onto these things called the special teams,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that was kind of how that went. But the freshman year overall, I think it was. I only think I played. I only played two freshman games to the best of my recollection. I played a few of the JV games. The rest of them with the JV team, and then I was fortunate enough to get into a few varsity contests as well. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a pretty good experience. Yeah.
Think about this too, Bill. I mean, that says a lot about you as an athlete. It's your first year ever playing football, and within 2 games, they decide that they need you to move up. That you're good enough where you could play JV and then even get some varsity. And that varsity year was a good year for Seymour. I mean, they knocked off Derby. I think the 8th game of the year was like a 26-0 game. I think you had guys like Mike Gray that were on that team. So you're learning from very good football players as a freshman. So that first year alone, you definitely were able to retain a lot and, learn from some real good football players.
Well, I'll tell you that year. I mean, if I look back, that was probably one of the most talented teams that I had played with, and the record wasn't the greatest record. I think we're 7-3, or I think it
Right.
was 7-3 that year. Um, but for me, being a freshman, looking up to guys like Todd and Scott Elliott and Mike Gray, which you mentioned, and Paul Connick and Brian Grass, those are some of the names that were. I mean, they were like NFL players to me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, look at the size. The Elliots were men. I'm pretty sure they were
Yeah.
actual men at the age of like 13 years old. By the time they were 16 and 17 and 18, they were like middle aged. So it was quite an ordeal.
Right. And I mean, you learned right away. I mean, what kind of Coach Sponheimer was, and especially Coach Kello, because one thing about Coach Kello, his offense had to make sure they knew their responsibilities, or he was going to come down a little on you guys. He was that type of guy. But that's why I really believe that program was so successful, because these coaches weren't just teaching you about the game of football; they were really teaching you to be young men. And I think that's, if anything else, like, throw out all the records for just a second. I think that's what a lot of these football players gained out of it more than anything else, was, like you said, life lessons.
Oh, 100%. And Bob Kello and Coach Sponheimer, they worked real well together, and they kind of, Coach Sponheimer let Coach Kello have his role, and he was a really smart man. I've heard that was a genius by educational levels, um, and he didn't take failure well. I mean, mental mistakes were not his passion. That was one way of getting yourself out of the lineup real quick, is by making a few mental mistakes.
Right. And speaking of Coach Kello, your freshman year of baseball, you find a spot in the starting outfield as a right fielder. So right away, I mean, we knew what kind of baseball player you were, but Coach Kello, to have that faith in the freshman to start you in the outfield like that had to be a great feeling. And I'm sure at the same time, a little nervous. You're a young kid, and that Coach Kello, again, he coaches like he does in football. He's very big on detail, like attention to detail. That's why he's such a great coach. So, I mean, had to be a great feeling to be starting as a freshman.
Well, by the time I got to my freshman year, I was catching quite a bit, and I was real comfortable behind the dish. I hadn't played the outfield in a couple of years, probably since that bad throw in Little League over there, over the
Yeah.
backstop. Um, so I hadn't taken a lot of reps of fly ball. So I was more than nervous, to say the least, when they sent me in the outfield. But lucky for me, is a short porch in right field, and you can't get too scared at those 200-foot fly balls. So it worked out for me, I suppose.
Right. And just, I'm sure people would love to hear these stories because they're fun. But Coach Kello had some unique practices. I think you guys had to do the running to the poles and back and stuff like that. And he was very big on, like, you had to get a certain amount of laps done in a certain time. So he really worked you guys hard, but that's why that team was so successful. That's why that program was so successful for, I think he was there 29 years. So
Yeah, for both baseball and football. I wasn't sure if I was playing baseball, football, or if I was on a track team at the time with some of the running that we had to do. But yeah, I didn't pitch a lot in high school, at least in my junior and senior year. But Coach Keller had a rule that for every walk that you had to do a pole back and forth. So that's probably why I didn't pitch. I said, Coach, I can't run that far.
So let me ask you, Bill, did you like playing the outfield? Because people I've talked to over the years when I've had guys on from Derby and Sonia, they didn't mind the outfield, but they did say you really had to, be quick off the ball when the ball was hit, like get a good jump. I mean, did you have trouble at all in right field, just trying to, time the ball where it was going, or were you pretty comfortable with it?
You mean specifically in French or just in general?
Just in general.
Yeah, listen, the outfield is a position that I truly think anybody can play the outfield as long as you got the speed and you can get a read off the ball. It takes reps. It's just like anything else. It takes reps, and fly balls are probably the easiest thing in baseball to improve on just by getting reps.
Right.
Yeah, I felt comfortable. By the beginning of the season, if you ask if I was comfortable, I'll tell you absolutely not. First couple of games. After that, I'm very comfortable out there.
Right. So, Bill, sophomore year comes for football, and the '89 team, it was more of like a rebuilding year that year. I mean, I think the team finished 6-4, but some tough losses early on. I can think of the Cheshire game. That was a tough loss, and I want to say there was an upset along the way in there, maybe Brantford. But I mean, the '89 team kind of rebounded well towards the end. They won their last two games. What would you say about your sophomore year? I mean, did you feel very comfortable as a starter, in, playing defense and offense as well?
Yeah, you say it's a rebuilding year, and perhaps it was, in hindsight, but there are some pretty talented people on that squad as well. And sometimes I think looking back, those are difficult schedules that we had then. I mean, if you compare it to some of the schedule that maybe Seymour has now, and and the NVL in general, we played a lot of large schools that had good quality football programs. So we were, of course, as you know, one of the smaller schools, and I think we were competitive with just about everybody. And I don't recall being blown out at all by any team, any of those examples there. So. I thought sophomore year was great. I think it was a tailback as well. I was a linebacker and a tailback. It was a good experience, a lot of fun. It is what it is. You can't win them all, I suppose.
Right, and I think a big highlight of that season was an upset over Naugatuck, because Naugatuck was undefeated going into the game. You guys had just had a tough loss the week before the Derby, which was a 16-15 nail biter. And you guys came back and won that game against a great Naugatuck football team. And I really felt like, that was typified Seymour, the football program, because they didn't just dwell on games they lost. They would go back out there the next week. And that's a credit to the coaching staff and the players having a great week of practice and coming ready for that Naugatuck game.
You had to mention that Derby loss, huh? You had to get that one in. I see Jason Palmieri quite often, and he reminds me just about every time that I see him about that 16-15 loss that we had against them.
Yeah, that was a great game, though. It really was. I mean, it was a great game between two teams. But I just really felt that Naugatuck win. And I'll tell you what, I mean, everybody thought Naugatuck and Ansonia were going to go in against each other undefeated. And really, that kind of took the sails out of Naugatuck. So, I mean, you guys really did a great job.
Well, I think it goes to a testament to Valley football, really. I mean, you could pretty much bet on any. It's very difficult to be a Vegas, bet maker in Valley football, because truly, I feel like any team could have beat anyone any given day, and that's my feeling for the 4 years that I was, directly a part of it, for sure.
Right. So, Bill, talk to me about sophomore year of baseball. You went from right field now. Were you at shortstop, or were you catching at that point by now?
I was catching and pitching, I believe I was that year.
Catching and pitching. So just talk about that, because you know what? That's not easy to do. I mean, you're pitching one game and then the next game you're behind the plate. So your arm and knees are getting a lot of work throughout the week because sometimes there's 3 games a week. So just talk to me about that sophomore year, being able to kind of juggle both pitching and catching.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more today. There's a lot more emphasis on arm safety, and yeah, no fault of anyone's. That's where my arm really started feeling some pain at the end of by the end of that year. You know, arms are funny, right? They're kind of like cars. So you buy one car, you're going to get 250,000 miles out of it, and you buy the next one off the lot, it's only got 100,000 miles out of it before it goes no good. Well, I had the 100,000-mile version, I think, and I used quite a few miles that sophomore year, both pitching and catching, and that is it's a lot for anybody to do. I wouldn't recommend that moving forward. I mean, I think the pitch count rules are great. I know you can still pitch and catch, but most coaches today at the youth level won't let that happen. At least in my view, the better coaches. So yeah, that was a tough environment for me, but it was kind of like a necessary evil. We needed to do what we had to do, and that was the plan of attack.
Right. And one of the things about Coach Kello, Bill, I can never remember him having what you call a bad season because every year that team was right there in the Housy. Every year that team was right there to make the tournament. People forget, too, you had to win 10 games to make the tournament. Now, I think you win 7 and make the tournament. But so, I mean, he just always year in and year out got the most out of his players. And I think sometimes people forget just how underrated of a coach he was.
He was a great coach. Fundamentally, listen, fundamentals today are different than the fundamentals then. They've changed over the years, but he was cutting edge back then. And his attention to detail was wonderful. As a manager or a third base coach, I think he made great calls most of the time. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, but the things that he did that were different, I think, than a lot of other coaches is, his attention to detail and the fundamentals. And then, you got a fair amount of home games. And French Park is a field that's unique in many respects. We would literally have drills for a half an hour about chasing the ball down to the road, throwing it up sidearm up to the hill, doing a double cutoff and throwing a guy out to play. I mean, those are the kind of practices that he ran, every scenario that you could imagine. And, one of the things that I learned from Coach Kello was, control the controllables. Sometimes you just can't, you can't handle, you can't change what, it's going to, the ball's that's what the ball's going to give you, but you can control the controllables, and that's really mental mistakes. If you can avoid making mental mistakes and force the mental mistakes onto your opponent, you're going to win more times than you lose. I mean, you've got to be pretty bad. It's going to be pretty well one-sided if you can reduce the mental mistakes down to zero and have the other team have a few. So that was a big thing, big learning for me, which was control the controllables and no mental mistakes.
Right. Junior year, Bill, of football, and I thought that was one of the best Seymour teams I ever saw. They knocked off Cheshire. They had a huge win against a great North Haven team. I think it was like 33-6 or 33-7. I mean, just a phenomenal, talented team that you played on that year. Talk about that 90 team a little bit because I know they went 7-3, but I'll tell you what, all year that team was a force in high school football. And I mean, just like I said, and you had a tremendous year. I believe you were all Valley. So it was just a great team for you to play on that year.
Oh yeah, it was a great team. That year I moved to fullback,
right?
And we had Dave Dewey at tailback. We had a big solid line with Jeff Carina, Rich Connors. Carina was a junior at the time. Talented receivers with Sonny Szynski and Primaveras had both been playing, and Pete Del Toro was our quarterback. And to this day, he throws one of the best balls that I've seen in high school sports. I mean, just powerful arm, super smart guy, made great reads. You're right. Probably should have been the year that something happened in terms of a state championship.
It was really a great team. I mean, and like I said, one of the teams that I think sometimes people put emphasis on records, which is fine because you have to. But that team was very underrated, and I mean, they held their own against everybody that year. And let me ask you, Bill, I mean, what was your mindset going into senior year for Seymour football? Because I know now you're no longer, and you were a veteran by the time your sophomore year ended, but now you're like expected to do big things, you and your fellow seniors. I mean, what was the expectation of the seniors on that team going into the 91 season?
Well, by that time, I knew where the guard was, so that was a good thing. Yeah, I think the expectation is no different any of those years in reality, other than as a senior or an upperclassman, you have to step up and show some additional leadership. I don't think the expectation was any different. An expectation was to win. There was no team that was better than us. There's no team that we couldn't beat. The only thing we could do is beat ourselves, and sometimes that happens. But that was really the expectation, kind of going into that year, which was, there's no team that we can't beat in the league.
Right. And Bill, let me ask you. I mean, as a leader of that team, and you'd been like I said, playing varsity since a freshman. What kind of attitude would you have, just you in general, when you have underclassmen coming in, sophomores coming in, because you want them to feel part of this program, but at the same time, you want them to know that they have to be committed. So how did you handle, like, when the underclassmen came in? Would you take a couple kids under your wing, especially a kid who's playing the same position as you, and he may be replacing you the following year? I mean, how would you, what was your mindset with that?
Yeah, I always liked the underdogs, and it was I don't mean by underdogs, I mean the underclassmen and people that work real hard to try to get. For me, up until this day, I have a lot of respect for people that work really hard, even if your talent isn't where it could be. People that work hard gain my respect quickly, and there's quite a few players. I'm not going to name names, but that we kind of took under our wing, not just me, but we, the seniors, and I think being a better football players for it, for sure.
Right. So junior year of baseball, Bill, was a tremendous year for you, especially individually. I mean, you were named to the All Housy team, and I don't care, Bill. Like, All State is nice, but when you're playing in the league 20 games a year and you're playing about 18 league games, to be chosen as one of the All Housy players, that has to be a great feeling and a tremendous accomplishment. So just talk about when Coach Kello told you that you had been selected to that team.
Quite honestly, I never put a lot of stock into those into those accolades. I kind of like the stats that I would put up as opposed to the accolades that I would get in the back end. I mean, I prefer to throw out a few more guys at the as a catcher rather than and not get all Housatonic League or All State or whatever it might be, as opposed to I didn't put a lot of stock into them. What I did like about having those accolades was the dinners that we'd go to, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily for the food, because it was crappy Villa Bianca food at the time. It wasn't that great, but it was you got to see the people that you competed against for a long time, and you went from being adversarious in the field, whether it be baseball or football, primarily football. But then you're sitting with them around at a dinner, and you're wearing a tie, and you're kind of giving each other a hard time and building relationships and just gaining and earning some respect from people. It's not like today where my kids, they play against kids from other teams. Like, oh yeah, I know this guy. He played. This is how many years he played. With social media, it's really easy to have good close contact with competitors. It wasn't so much like that back then. And those were really some unique times, which I really appreciated, to get to know some of my competitors.
Right, exactly. And Bill, senior year of football, one of the things that you got to do for the first time in your career, maybe you played them as freshmen, I don't know, but you got to play Ansonia, the first game of the year. It was the 11th game, and that was a great game. I mean, it was a 14-7 game. What I always remember about the game is the amount of players that went down with cramps. I mean, it was really like a game of, where everybody just like was having a tough time with the weather that day. But you guys really gave them a great game. I mean, I really expected that Seymour team to do well. But talk to me about just getting to play against Ansonia, because in high school football, we all know who Ansonia is. I mean, they've been a staple in high school football forever. So what was that like for you to get to play in an Ansonia game like that?
Well, I did. We did play him as a freshman in my freshman year. I did not see the field, to my recollection, that game at all, and that was
Right.
a close game too, as I recall. But we lost, so I went through my high school career without having a victory against Ansonia, which unfortunately a lot of people can say, I think, because that is just it's an iconic program. You can't not have respect for Ansonia football, and everything that they brought to the table. And we thought we were going to win that game. As I recall, we were pretty close, and and so was able to pull it out, as they do so many times. I mean, you think you've got them licked, and they come back and get you. But playing Ansonia is certainly a great opportunity. I look back at it and say, yeah, I played them too. They've state championships 357 times now. So yeah.
And Bill, a highlight of that season. Now, you talked to me earlier about me bringing up the Derby loss and how Jay Palmieri talks to you about it sometimes. But you guys were
often
going into Ryan Field, and Derby was 2-0 going into that game. And Derby was on a 13-game winning streak. And you guys pulled off an unbelievable upset at Ryan Field that Saturday morning. And you had a tremendous game. I think you were the Cable 10 player of the game. So just talk about you guys getting that victory, because in Seymour back then, especially, Seymour's rival was Derby. I mean, Coach Sponheimer always treated the Derby game like the big game for the kids on that schedule. So just talk about getting that win against Derby your senior year.
Oh yeah, that was classic old school Valley football. When Seymour was playing Derby, it was a big day. It was a crowd pleaser, to say the least. The stands would be full. A few thousand people anyway watching that football game. And you got your engines roaring a little bit, probably a little bit more than any other game that you're going to play that season. Ben Bartone, who was the quarterback at Derby at the time, he and I were pretty friendly. We played on a travel baseball team at the time, so we're pretty friendly. But when it came to game day, it was war, all out war, and we were doing our best to see if we could beat each other. And that day we found ourselves on top, so it was a good thing.
Yeah, it was definitely, and you had a tremendous game, and you had a great year that senior year, Bill. And again, you guys knocked off Naugatuck again. So in your 3 years of varsity, well, you played 4, I understand that, but that group of kids that played 3 years of varsity, they were able to have a winning record against Naugatuck. And again, Naugatuck was right there with Derby when it came to a big rival for Seymour. That was their non-league game. Derby's non-league was Ansonia. Ansonia also played Shelton. So you guys had that non-league rival with Naugatuck, and getting that win against them, that had to be a tremendous accomplishment for you guys as seniors.
Absolutely, yeah. That was a great victory, a lot of fun. You think back to some of those big wins, and Naugatuck certainly stands out as one of the top.
Right. So, Bill, talk to me about that final game that you ever played for Seymour football, because I know it was emotional. Coach Sponheimer, like I said, he's a very demanding coach. He puts a lot of expectations on his players, but he loves those players like they're his sons, and he's always treated them that way. And when you are a Wildcat, you're a Wildcat for life. That's his motto. And he would always bring you guys back to be on the field for games if you wanted to stand on the sidelines. So he always gave back to the kids that played for that program. So just talk to me about what the moment was like for you when you realized, this is it for me at Seymour football. I mean, it had to be a little bittersweet, correct?
Yeah, we were playing Amity, and we mentioned Buddy Chernovich earlier, and his son was playing against us, and I had a pretty good run up the middle, and I think his son Brad Chernovich, and a couple others got me down probably after a 30 or 40-yard run. And then, there wasn't much time left in the game. We had the game won, and he calls my name. It's Bill Brooks. I'm off the field, whatever. And I says, "Oh, geez, I think this is the last time I'm going to run a football here." And it was. So, it was bittersweet, to say the least. I mean, the triple sessions, I didn't miss those. Those were very hellish. Yeah. But in hindsight, I'd like to go back and do it again.
Right. And it had to be just a great feeling for you to know that you played for such a program that had so much tradition. I mean, anytime Coach Sponheimer answered the phone at that field house, he referred to it as Wildcat football. He loved that program so much. And I mean, he loved the kids that played for him. So for you to be able to be a part of that Seymour legacy, that has to be something that you'll take with you forever.
Tremendous amount of pride in that program. Absolutely.
Right. So senior year of baseball, Bill, I mean, one thing that in your career that I know was important to you was taking home a title. And you guys would win the Housatonic League title in 1992. Now, Bill, one of the games that was really interesting was against Derby because you were the cleanup hitter that year. You guys had the bases loaded, nobody out against Derby, I think. And Coach Kello had you bunt, which was pretty unique to have his power hitter bunt. And I think you bunted it just a little over the third baseman's head, and you guys won the game. So just talk about like that, because that had to be something that Bill Brooks didn't do a lot of in high school.
Now, quite honestly, I don't remember that specific play. I believe it happened, but I don't recall it. That was what Coach Keller did. And, he wasn't afraid. There was no heroes on Coach Keller's team, and people just had to get the job done. And so whether it be taking a walk or bunting the ball, and I probably didn't bunt the ball a whole lot, but it was probably like bunt for a base hit or something like that. I don't recall, but he would do whatever it took for the team. It was a team first attitude, and I think that was another good key learning that I took away from Coach Keller was team first.
And think about the accomplishment you guys did winning that Housy, because think about the teams in there. I'll start with Derby. They won the state title that year. They had Ben Bartone and Donnie Shepard, who were tremendous pitchers. Then you have North Haven, who's always good. Bob DeMayo is a legendary coach. You have Amity. You have Brantford. You have I already brought up North Haven, Sheehan. You have all these teams that are always hard to beat. It's not easy to win in that league. So to win a Housatonic League championship, I mean, that had to just be something that you guys, to this day look back on and really have a lot of pride that you guys were able to do that.
Yeah, like I said, that Housatonic League then was a really, really competitive operation. It was a really competitive league, and it's unfortunate that it kind of got broken up because I think there was a lot of pride in that league. But it is what it is. So yeah, that was a major sense of accomplishment when we did that, and that was a real prideful team as well. There was a lot of pride in that team with guys like Frank Oroz and Jack McNack and Rob Cafaro. Some really good quality people in addition to being good players.
Right. And Bill, another accomplishment that you did that year is you were selected to the All-State team. And again, you mentioned it before, you didn't get caught up in those accolades, but to be able to say you're an All-State baseball player, it has to be a great thrill. And I'm sure it was a great thrill for your family. I know you and your father were very close. That had to be something that you got to share with him, being at that dinner and stuff. That had to be just an unbelievable feeling for you.
Yeah, it was great. Like I said, you get to see a lot of people that you competed against that you really didn't know very well, and I found it was a good opportunity to build some relationships. But because it was a great honor. Don't take it wrong, but just because a bunch of reporters think that you want to select you to be something, doesn't mean I'm any better than anybody else. In my mind, when the stats kind of talk and the quality of the teams that you play against, those are where the rubber meets the road, not necessarily where some coaches or some reporters think should be the best players.
Right. Now, Bill, one story I heard of, and you tell me if I'm right or you tell me if it's just an urban legend, but
I'm denying it. I'm telling you right now, I'm denying it.
But a story I heard was that when you kind of showcased for Porky Vieira, the legendary University of New Haven coach, he basically kept having you throw balls until your arm practically fell off. I mean, is that story true? And what was that experience like, just showcasing for him?
Well, at the time, I'd been just about finishing up halfway through summer ball, as I recall, and my arm was in pretty rough shape there to begin with. And he had me hit about 2,000 balls, and then just start throwing to second base. And I don't remember how many throws I had, but if you could picture a rainbow by the time the thing was my last couple throws, that was about what you had. But Coach Vieira was not known for taking it easy on people's arms.
Right. And Bill, think about this. I mean, you came very close to making the pros. I mean, like I said, you just were an unbelievable baseball player. I mean, did you enjoy playing in college? I mean, a little more demanding, now, like, did you feel like stuff that you learned in high school, you learned even more when you got to the college level?
No, I don't think so. I think the fundamentals were there already. I mean, I was fortunate to have a number of good coaches. Dick James, who was one of the head assistants for Yale University baseball.
Yeah.
That was probably the greatest fundamental coach that I'd ever had an opportunity to work with. So I think I had the fundamentals down as well as I was going to get them at that point. And I think in that program, it was more about managing the players as opposed to really teaching fundamentals from that standpoint. But quite honestly, I had the 100,000-mile warranty on the arm, and it wasn't going well.
And now, Bill, Joe Bonanto was gone by the time you got there, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. But I mean, think about this. I mean, you got to play for an unbelievable program at Seymour with a lot of tradition, and then you played for this tremendous program at Yale. I mean, you can't ask for like a kid who from ages, we'll start with like ages 10 to about 22 to have the experiences that you had in such a short life at the time. I mean, those had to be just so gratifying that you got to experience things like that.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, absolutely. It was, I had played at a higher level than I thought was even available at the time. So yeah, that was, those were really great experiences. And I think also you don't know what you've got until it's not there anymore. So in hindsight, it was probably a little more ambitious than perhaps I thought it was at the time as well.
Right. And Bill, I know like you're not one to like talk about yourself or say, oh, wow, I got to do this or I got to do that. But that's okay. People like me will do it for you. But you got to play on a team with Johnny Damon and Alex Rodriguez, as I mentioned early on. There's a great picture of that that's still there. I think you're standing right behind A-Rod in that picture. And I mean, did you know at the time that like those two guys could be great baseball players? I mean, just talk about that experience of playing on that team.
Well, Todd Helton was on that team as well, and he was kind of the stud. I mean, if there's a stud, he was right. The guy then. That team stemmed from, there was a Mickey Mantle travel team that I was on. That was where I played for Dick James from Yale, and we made a bunch of tournaments. And the thing about the Mickey Mantle League that I think it still is now is that even if you lose the tournament, the opposing team, the team was victorious, can pick a player or two from the losing team to go on to the tournament with them. And I was fortunate enough to go on to the tournament, to the championship. And I got scouted by some people, and I played for this guy named Steve Bort and asked me to play for him. And Steve Bort ran this team. It's like an East Coast All-American team, he called it. And he had those players that you mentioned on the team. And, they're good. Johnny Damon, I would have never guessed was going to make the pros because, I mean, the kid could run like a deer. He hit the ball well, but he had an arm like he's throwing left-handed. I mean, he was never known in the pros for a strong arm, but when he was 16, 17 years old, it was very, very bad arm. So that one I wouldn't have guessed necessarily at the time.
Right.
A-Rod, it was Alex at the time. He wasn't A-Rod yet, right? So he was, you could just tell, a tremendous athlete. I think he was actually a little younger than me too.
Right.
Yeah. He could, he was inconsistent, but he looked so beautiful doing it that you just knew the guy had the endless potential. So I can recall one game where it was a championship against California, and he had booted a couple of balls back to back, and we lost the game. But the play right before that, he made a diving play, probably 15 yards into left field, and threw a guy out by 3 steps, to first base. It's like, this is unbelievable. The guy had a 95-mile-an-hour ball going across the field from his knee. So yeah, you just knew that guy had talent, and a lot of the players that we played with were, I ended up playing professional baseball, and like I said, Todd Helton, he just he probably had.
He was a great player for Colorado.
He probably had 8 or 10 home runs just in that tournament.
Right. So, Bill, let me ask you, as a guy that played baseball for so long, and I mean, you know the game so well. Have you done any coaching since you've been out of high school and college, or?
Yeah, I coached quite a bit. I coached some travel baseball, pretty competitive level. Uh, Played at the Division One level, so the open level, if you will. Coached since I guess I've been coaching. The exception of the last 2 years, I've coached for 17 years, I guess, and I got to tell you, I love it. It's a passion of mine to coach, specifically the younger kids, probably that 12-ish age range, because there's just so much you can teach them, and they're still willing to learn so much. Once they get into that, the big field, it seems like they're starting to. At least they believe they know what's going on. So I've coached quite a bit. I've got actually, you could probably see behind me. Those are some of the trophies that we've got over the years in terms of coaching.
And a lot of people will tell me that whether they're a football player, basketball, baseball, whatever it might be, that they love the coaching aspect of it more than they did as they were players, because what they could be able to teach, they see these kids perform and do great things, that the coaching aspect of it is definitely more rewarding to them than the playing was.
Yeah, it's great to see teams unite. That's been as a leader of a team. Of all the teams that I've played for, the most talented team is not necessarily the best team that you ever play for. Right. And there's something to do. There's a team building aspect to it that a good coach can really unify his players and have them learn from each other and really aspire to be a great team. And to me, that's just as important as teaching the fundamentals and all the things that go along with the sport, is that team first kind of attitude.
Right. And now, 31 years later, Bill, it comes full circle for you, because I mentioned it earlier. October 28th, you're going to be honored with other former Seymour athletes getting into the Seymour Sports Hall of Fame. And that's a big honor. I mean, Seymour's had so many great athletes throughout their history of sports. What was the reaction like when you got the call that you had been selected to that Hall of Fame?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it's a super honor. I'm happy to go there and be a part of it. It's an accolade. It's nice to have. The memories that I've got from the organization and the teams probably are more fond than this. That's really where the learnings were, where I found the greatest success. But this is a great honor to be inducted into the Hall of Fame for sure.
Right. So, Bill, before we go, what would you say, as far as just your sports career in general, what was the most rewarding thing that you got out of playing, whether it was high school sports, college sports? What's the one thing that you would say was most rewarding about it?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and I think I'll bring it back to the life lessons, and that's the importance and the value of failure, right? I mean, you lose that game to Paul Mary, that's a tough one to swallow for a minute, right?
Right.
So you learn how to deal with that as time goes on. You have enough of those failures, you build up some resilience, and I think that it means when you win, you have more of a sense of pride. And when you lose, you can, use that as a building tool moving forward in life, not just in a day-to-day game. But those are where some of the building blocks begin, and that's why I think there's a tremendous value to youth sports. And by the way, I'll say this too: there's a tremendous value to youth sports. I'll say that first. The second piece of that would be that I think that meaning my generation, is really ruining youth sports. There's so much of a demand to keep up with the Joneses and keep up with little Johnny and what Johnny's dad is doing. And he's got the $500 bat, so we'll get the $600 bat. Look at this. These football gloves. They stick like glue. And let's play this travel team and that travel team. And it takes away from the family environment to some degree. Myself included, for a couple of years until I kind of came to this realization. We didn't have a family vacation because we were playing 72 baseball games during the summer. So I've learned that over coaching over times, which is you need to get a good balance between family and sports. But youth sports in particular is a great building block for life lessons.
Well, that's a great answer, Bill. It just shows the type of person you are. And I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. I congratulate you on what was a tremendous high school career, college career. But it sounds like to me that as a person, you're an even better person than you were an athlete because you really understand what the importance of teaching kids sports and teaching them stuff, and that you don't get caught up in all the other nonsense that could go with it sometimes. So I really do applaud you on a wonderful career. And thank you again for giving me a few minutes today.
Good talking to you, Mike. Thanks for the honor.
Well, there you have it, folks. When you talk about Seymour sports and you talk about legendary athletes, Bill Brooks has to be right up there with all of them. Look at the career he's had. Football, he was a 4-year player, a 3-year starter. Baseball, he was a 4-year starter. All state, all Housy. Football, all Valley. I mean, you name it, this kid did it all. But I think what's more important than anything else is the lessons that Bill Brooks got out of playing sports. He never forgot his coaches. He never forgot the teammates that played with him. And he always cared about team first and himself second. And that is what stands out the most about Bill Brooks. For Hometown Heroes, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.